G'day folks, it's Mark here from Street Effects, and today marks 4 months since we picked up our nice new Toyota A90 Supra. Now that I've had some quality time with it, I can tell you all the things that I love and all the things that I hate about it as both a daily driver and as a weekend racer. We've also had a chance to take it out to the track to put it through its paces, so stick around or skip to the end of the video if you want to see what it was like compared against other sports cars and even some supercars out on the circuit. Before I get started, I do need to address a few incorrect statements I made in the first video. First up, I said that there was a section of the dashboard that was not used for anything aside from the door open and closed sign. Now, while it is used for the door open and closed, that section is actually used mostly, I found out shortly after I made the first video, for the navigation instructions. So where that little arrow is there, that will come up with your turn signals and things like that. Though, to be honest, that does seem like it's a bit of overkill, considering that means we've actually got 3 different places the navigation is displayed in. We've got the spot on the instrument cluster here, the center console display, and also on the heads-up display. I'd have liked to have seen that space used for things like boost pressure and temperature, especially for track driving when you're not needing guidance anyway. The second thing that we had noticed is that over the past few months, the exhaust has actually gotten louder. In our initial review, we mentioned the exhaust is extremely quiet. But it has gotten louder over time. It's probably due to the exhaust packing in the mufflers may have settled down, and it's sort of gotten a little bit more freer flowing. We get some crackles and pops. It's nowhere near as loud as the US spec exhaust still. But it's still far louder than it was when we first got the car. So anyone that's bought one, you've still got some hope yet, but it also indicates that maybe once we do replace the exhaust on this, it hopefully will be as loud as the US spec ones, if not louder. Now that those are out of the way, onto a few different things that we've noticed, some good and bad over the past few months of driving. The first being that if you're using it for daily driver duties, you will probably notice that there's no boot release on the outside of the car. So you have to fumble around with your keys to be able to pop the boot, or there's a little switch down here underneath the speaker on the driver's door. It can be a little bit clumsy when you're trying to open the boot. Secondly is in the back of the car, the luggage area needs a cargo net or something to stop things flying around in the back when you're going around corners. So we've grabbed the luggage net out of our Audi and then hooked it on. That has helped stop things flying around in the back of the car, because that can be a bit problematic. The inductive charging pad for mobile phones down here, that's in a really inconvenient spot because you've got these USB and charger plugs that obstruct your ability to get the phone in and out of there. That's it's not very well thought through, but in the end I don't even use that charger pad anyway, because I find that with a phone case on, they don't work properly regardless. The center display contrast, which is something that we'd mentioned in a previous video, that we only managed to fix by using this OBD flash tool. If it hadn't been for that, that would be barely visible in sunlight like today. So that, I've been told, may have been fixed in the later revisions of the car. All it is a flash update, so I would expect it's not too hard for Toyota to fix, but it's definitely an issue. When driving around in the sun like today, that whole center section is nearly impossible to see. One of the biggest issues that I found, which is a little bit annoying, if you put the windows down, the buffeting inside the car, it gets unbearable. It decreases the driving enjoyment a bit, because I like to have my windows down sometimes. So I'm hoping that Toyota does come out with some maybe revised mirror designs in the later models, because that will probably bug you after a little while of not being able to drive. It's not even from 100 k's an hour. It's like it starts at about 40 k's an hour. So it's not even an issue that's isolated to high speeds. The suspension in it, it's a bit soft for my liking. It's great for daily driving. It's great for launches off the lights, because you get a lot of squat in the rear. So good for drag strip. Not so good for track though. So some heavier springs, sway bars, whatever like that might be useful in if you're intending to track it a bit. The launch control, it's again something we mentioned in one of the other videos that we did about our quarter mile drag times. The launch control in it's next to useless. I found it, out of the 4 times on the drag evening, it only engaged once. Fucking hell, what is going on here? Other times it would either smoke the tires or it would just bog down and wouldn't engage at all. So if you do want to launch it, you're better off just using your feet. So hold the brake on, accelerate, stall it up to about 2500 RPM, and then lift the brake off and off you go. That seems to be far more consistent than the actual launch control, which is a little bit disappointing. I'm going to guess it's a software thing that can be probably fixed in later models as well. But the big question that everybody has been asking us is, what is it like on the track? Now I'm going to tell you that all those negatives can be thrown right out the window, because on the track this car is absolutely incredible. And in fact, I cannot think of another vehicle that's brand new, that's in the same sort of price range as this, that would outdo it on the circuit. So in Australia, these are around $90,000 to $100,000. The closest thing that I can think of would be something like the BMW M2 Competition or the Porsche Cayman S, both of which are substantially more expensive, and I think they would struggle to outdo this and outperform this on the track anyway. We did beat a few M2s when we went out to a recent race meet. We actually did enter an event called King of Queensland Raceway, where in our class, which was two-wheel drive performance, we ended up coming third in class, and that was against modified performance vehicles. We actually were stuffed into the category of modified because of the size of our rear tires. From factory, these have a 275, and in the class we wanted to run in, which was street class, the maximum size tire you could run was a 265. Funnily enough, they've actually changed the rules for this year coming. They've moved the tire size up to a 275 for the street class, and we would have actually been first. And that was against some decent competition as well. There was a lot of interesting vehicles out on that day. Thankfully, not all of them were in our class, but this car performed flawlessly. Brakes on it, they're not much to look at. They don't look like anything special, but I'm telling you now, the braking on it was incredible. We did around 60, 65 laps during the day, and it stopped and pulled up every single time. We didn't get brake fade as such, but we did get a spongy pedal, which is something we did notice on the media launch day down at Phillip Island. After smashing the car all day, the brakes did start to get a little bit spongy, so I would think it needs some higher temp fluid. So before we go out next time, we're going to be putting some pads and fluid in to mitigate that. The handling is also fantastic. The only criticism that I have is it has quite a lot of body roll, which you will be able to see from some of the pictures from the day. The car heels over a bit. Again, that's easily fixed with some aftermarket components. Could probably do with some coilovers, but I don't want to actually go down that route, because then we'd lose the electronic damper control that comes up through settings here. So we've got the damping control, which is something that we don't want to lose, because it actually makes the car nice and comfortable to drive on the street. So we might do some springs, maybe sway bars, not sure yet, but I do think it does need some fiddling with the suspension to make it sit a bit flatter through the corners. I would like to see a more aggressive wheel alignment. We haven't had a chance to wheel align this yet at all, so we're not actually sure what adjustability there is in the arms. It's possible, being a modern car, that it may not have much adjustment at all. Some more aggressive camber on the front would help us maximize the grip of the tires throughout the corners, so it's definitely going to be a plus if we can dial in some more negative. So onto the topic of tires, that's probably the biggest letdown that I've seen from this car so far, is the Michelin Pilot Super Sports. They're most likely great for every day and longevity and mileage, but on the track they were a bit of a letdown. The car did start to get pretty slippery and skatey towards the end of each session, and then once they started to let go, that was it. They had to cool down before they'd grip up again. So before we go back out next time, we'll definitely be putting some new tires on it. The power delivery in this car is very linear, and as we saw from our dyno runs, it actually puts down more power than advertised. We put down 340 horsepower at the wheels. Which equates to somewhere close to around 380, 390 horsepower at the engine. So it was pretty obvious that they'd understated their specs considering how quick this car is in a straight line, so no surprise there. I have to say though, turbo technology has come a long way since the old JZA80, which had twin turbos to try and mitigate lag. by having two small turbos, and even then they were quite laggy for what they were. This has virtually no lag. It's very linear power delivery, and the boost comes on really, really nicely. So that's going to be one of the first things that anybody notices about it. It doesn't really feel like it's got a big turbo. However, people are being able to pull out 500 odd horsepower at the wheels, which is great for a turbo that's so responsive. Now on to probably what is the most controversial part of this car, and something that I never thought that I'd be saying personally, is the gearbox. It's annoyingly good. I know it's an automatic, but I can't fault it on the track. It changes when you want it to change. It downshifts, upshifts very, very fast. It'll kill a manual in any sort of shifting speed comparison. And it really feels more like a DCT. It's not like your old slush boxes from days of gone. It's surprisingly good, and I never thought that I'd be saying this, but instead of it being in the cons column, I actually think it's a pro. Because on the street, it drives beautifully and it's real comfortable and shifts seamlessly and goes about its business. And on the track, the paddle shifts and the manual shifting is actually really quick. About the only thing about the shifting that I did dislike is the fact that it doesn't have a very bright shift light. So you do sometimes, if you're in manual mode, you will miss the shift. I would have liked to have seen the shift lights maybe up on the heads-up display or a proper LED, because down in here, you don't actually see them. They actually come up. If I bring this up, the shift lights will display in this area here. So they come around, but they're not very bright, and you will most likely miss them. Another thing on the track that we saw as a bit of a negative is it's got a relatively small fuel tank, 52 litres. So in the course of the day, during those 60 laps, we ended up refilling 3 times. So I mean, it obviously chews through the fuel on the track. So a 52 litre tank's probably not going to go very far, and you don't really have much room in the boot for storing jerry cans, because they'll probably go flying around in the back as well. The biggest drawback that we saw on the track was the stability control. So we were testing what sort of lap times we could do with and without stability control, and when we had it engaged, it's no surprise that no stability control is generally faster, because the cars tend to err on the side of caution. But in our experience, with the stability control engaged, it was very intrusive, and it actually tried to force us off the track. When we were coming into turn 1 with a bit of speed, with the stability control engaged, we started to turn right, the tail end got a little bit twitchy, so we counter-steered slightly to the left, and the traction control and stability control ended up breaking the left-hand side of the car and tearing the steering wheel out of our hands, and forcing us off the track. So if there had been a wall there, that would have been a really bad scenario. I encourage anyone taking it down to the track, make sure that you disable stability control and also the safety system. And to do that, you want to press and hold this stability button for 3 seconds. And then you'll get the VSC off. And you also want to turn off the safety system, which is things like the AEB and all that. So you press and hold that button and turn that off. Otherwise, you'll have it potentially hitting the brakes for you if it detects that there's a car in front, and the lane keep assist and all that gets turned off as well. So I would suggest, before going out to the track, unless you're taking it easy, probably disable those things, because in our experience, it was probably more trouble than it's worth. So when it was actually trying to prevent an accident, it was more likely to cause one. So our results from Queensland Raceway, we managed to get a 1 minute 25 on the national circuit, a 1 minute 2 on the Clubman, a 59-second on the sprint. So that, to put it in perspective for people that don't know what Queensland Raceway is like, that was actually only 2 seconds slower than our $500,000 Lamborghini Huracan. So the fact that we're only 2 seconds a lap slower with a completely standard car, it speaks volumes. That suggests that even just a set of tires on this, and we would probably be able to make up those 2 seconds, and we would be beating that Huracan around the track. So that's some pretty impressive results there. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe, because in not too long, we will be taking it back out to the track with a set of modifications and see if we can improve an already awesome car and get some better lap times. All right, see you guys.